Hey Flames families, welcome to Flamekeepers, a podcast from UIC's new student and family programs that supports the parents and families of UIC students. I'm your host, Derek Robert Fuchs, Associate Director for Family and Transition Programs, and we're going global for today's episode. I'm joined by Anna Hoban, Associate Director for UIC's Office of International Services, to discuss how our Flames families can support international students. Please give a warm Flamekeepers welcome to Anna. Anna, thank you so much for being here. Before we start our conversation today that I'm really excited about, if you could just tell us just a little bit about yourself and, how long have you been at UIC and when you started working with international students and what excites you about working with them?
Thank you so much for having me. It's really lovely to be here today. I have been working at UIC since 2013. I've worked with the community for quite a bit, over 10 years now, which is really incredible. And before that, I entered the field in 2006, where I was also working with international students at another university in the Chicagoland area, and just got into this work after I myself did a study abroad program.
Okay, I was going to ask, being in higher ed, we see people, who have, kind of navigated different careers in this field, but you've been, working, with our international students, for a long time. So
like 20 years this summer.
Oh my gosh. So, and I was just going to ask, what was it, that drew you to this work?
Sure. So when I was an undergraduate student, I studied abroad in Spain. Absolutely loved it. Life-changing experience. And then decided I hadn't had enough. And so when I graduated, I went and taught English in Spain for a year, just kind of deciding, do I want to go into that field? But I found teaching wasn't really my passion, but I loved working with people from other countries. And so when I came back to the U.S., I was really lucky to find a job as a study abroad international student advisor at another school in Chicago, and did that and then really narrowed in on international students. I love supporting them, meeting people from other countries, kind of learning what makes them tick, helping them have that transformative international experience that I had, and supporting them along the way. And 20 years later, here we are.
Well, here we are. And we're super excited that, that you're here with UIC and you're with us today. Before, we set the stage and we talk, about just supporting our international students, what can you tell us about the international student community here at UIC? I know it's pretty large.
Yeah.
Got a lot of students from how many countries do we have represented?
I don't have that number off the top of my head, but it's near 100.
Yeah,
we have students from all over the world. We have over 3,500 international students studying at UIC in undergraduate and graduate programs.
Yeah, and that's about 10% of our population.
Yeah. It's a good chunk. And coming from all over the world. The biggest countries of origin are going to be India and China, but then also closely behind that, we have students from Bangladesh, Vietnam. We have students from Europe. We have students from Africa. We have students from South America, just truly all over the world.
Yeah, all over. And I mean, I think that's incredibly reflective of just Chicago in general. There's so many folks from so many different places all over the world who call this place home. And so, it makes sense,
Absolutely.
that we would have so much representation at our university just based on the city.
Yeah, no, talking to international students and their families, we hear over and over again, Chicago is a draw.
Yeah.
They want to be in Chicago and in UIC because it is a cosmopolitan city with influences from all over the world. They can find their little niche and have little aspects of home here in the United States.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm super glad, that you all help make this place feel, more like home for them. And Anna, just kind of on that note, I'd love to dive in just to our conversation today.
Sure, do it.
We're talking about folks coming from all over making places home or making UIC and Chicago home. But there's obviously, with every student coming in or even person just coming into a new environment, in general, there are some transitional issues. I was wondering if you could just share, what are just some common transitional issues or experiences that our international students face or, that you help them work through? I would love just if we start a conversation with that.
Sure. And I like how you frame it. All students go through a transition process. The transition to college is a big transition, no matter who you are. But you're right that international students, they have a specific lens, and there are some issues that they may deal with that are different than a domestic student or have to deal with things at a different timeline than a domestic student would. So I really like to look at the transition process in phases because depending on where you are in the timeline, different things are going to feel important. Different issues are going to be more salient. So I kind of, the first thing to look at is that pre-departure phase, the time between I've made the decision, I'm going to UIC,
Woo!
and that time you get on the plane to come to the United States, or maybe you're already in the US and you're transferring, but most of our students do come from their home countries. So that pre-departure time for an international student, some of the things that are going to be on their minds are immigration, obviously, getting their documents to apply for their visa, that visa application process. I won't go into much detail on that because our office, we do guide students through that, and we do have a lot of resources. We do virtual meetups where students can come and get questions answered. We kind of go dive into those topics a bit more. So as a family or someone supporting a student, I would say have them come to OIS, just really tap into all the resources we provide for immigration. Other things, I would say healthcare and health insurance is a conversation that's really good to have before the student comes to the United States. So sit down and talk about how is your student going to access medical care? Try to get a basic understanding of how the healthcare system functions in the United States, because it could be very, very different than how it functions in your home country. If you have a single healthcare system in your home country, here in the U.S., we don't. And we have health insurance, which is a big component of accessing care. One thing is that an international student, we say you must have health insurance when you're in the United States is an absolute must, a key component to gaining care and being financially protected. So all UIC students are required to have health insurance, and we have a program called Campus Care that is the Student Health Benefit Program. Most of our international students utilize that, but it's not a requirement. You can waive out of it if you have your own care, but as an international family, you want to be very certain that that health insurance covers you while in the United States and covers you adequately. So these are all conversations that I would encourage you to have with your student before they come to the U.S., before they get sick, before they need to access care, maybe not feeling their best.
Yeah.
So get to know those systems. And there are resources the university provides to understand how to get care and the campus care program. Another thing related to medical care that international students need to think about are immunizations or vaccines. So all students at UIC have to meet a medical immunization requirement, submitting documentation that they've had a certain series of vaccines or immunizations. And so depending on where you are in the world, those immunizations may or may not be routine. So take a look at that list. If you can and need to get a vaccine or an immunization that you haven't had, try to do it in your home country. It tends to be less expensive and a bit easier if you do. If you can't, you can get it done in Chicago. It just may cost a little bit out of pocket. And then also gathering the records you have to submit. You might need to get those translated into English. All of that is much easier to manage when you're in your home country than trying to do it from the United States and abroad.
Where can students, we've talked about these two things, where can our international students and their families, where can they find this information like readily available, like on, should they go to your website to see, maybe a list of immunizations? Because the registrar has that, but is there, should they go to, your website first and then get, branched out?
Yeah, so you can. On the OIS website, we have a whole section called Coming to UIC. And there is a page that is before you leave home. And there's all these topics that we think you should be working on before you leave home. And healthcare and medical issues is one of those tabs. So you can go there. We do link to the registrar's website. They're the ones that have the full list and all of the requirements for submitting proof of immunization. So they have all the details, but we can point you in the right direction.
Yeah, and we will link all of OIS's information in our show notes. What else, Hannah?
Yeah, so pre-departure, those are some of the things that an international student might be thinking about that's different than a U.S. student. Once you arrive, that immediate arrival time, I'm thinking a lot about basic needs, right? So is your student, where are they staying immediately upon arrival? International students have kind of a tightened timeline of when they can arrive to Chicago. And sometimes they want to get here before UIC housing opens up. So have that hotel booked, have that temporary housing booked before you get on the plane. Don't arrive without a place to sleep. But then once you do get into your permanent housing, whether that's in residence halls or in an apartment, how is your student accessing food? Food is so key to well-being, right? And when you're coming from another country, what's available to you might not be what's familiar.
Mm-hmm.
And so knowing the landscape, where can you go to shop and get the kinds of foods that you need? We're lucky we're in Chicago. There is a vast array of international markets, products. We're in the age of being able to order anything and have it shipped to you. So having a good plan of how you're going to access good quality food. Sleeping. International students often come from long distances and jet lag is real. So encouraging your student to get good sleep, to just eat well, get good sleep, drink water. I know it sounds very simple.
No, but getting into a routine like is incredibly important,
Yeah.
for any transitioning student.
Yeah.
So, and I just think especially, if you're coming, to a, new setting, like making sure getting in that routine, like for sure. And sleep is a part of that.
Sleep is so huge, and jet lag is real. So you can be encouraging your student, like, are you getting enough sleep? Where are you getting your food? Like, how are you eating? All of those things that families generally do, but keeping an eye on that. And other logistics, if you need to set up mobile services for a cell phone, or banking is a big one to set up the bank account. OIS, again, we provide some resources and some guidance on how to set up banking. UIC has a banking partner, PNC Bank, that has a branch right here in Student Center East, where we're recording today. And they work with a lot of our international students and know how to help them set up. It's not the only choice, but it's a pretty convenient one for setting up banking. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So those are some of the like immediate arrival issues. And again, if they're struggling with any of that stuff, they can always come to OIS, again, Office of International Services. I always say we don't have all the answers, but we can always help triage and guide them to where they need to go. So when all else fails, send them to OIS.
Yeah. International students come in and they are just really having a hard time transitioning, which is like completely normal. And so like families like, who are listening, like if your student is just having a rough time or they're just, trying to figure things out, first of all, like that's just so normal.
Right.
Like, and then, I think heightened, because, we're coming from outside of, the United States. And so, really, families like give your student grace, this is a completely normal experience for all students. But like, where can students go, like, if they're having a really hard time, like, like with culture shock, transitional issues, getting that routine established? What are some offices that you, closely work with? I think we've talked about, like, you all work at the counseling center, a bit to help students, get a little more acclimated. But are there other services, that you work closely with to help students as well?
Yeah. So that's kind of getting toward that last phase of transition. It's once you're kind of settled, you've taken care of the immediate, basic living needs, then that cultural adjustment starts to come to the surface. And you're dealing with some of those more complex issues of getting adjusted to this new place. Language, cultural differences, value differences, being far away from home, not being with your support network, and not being able to access them readily because of time difference. Those things that you maybe took for granted are much farther away. And so that's where we will see some issues of culture shock or difficulty with the adaptation come out. And things that families can look out for in their student are changes in sleep. Again, if your student is sleeping too much or not sleeping enough, or they're particularly withdrawn, or they're not eating, or they're not going to class the way you expect them. Those could be signals that they need a little extra support in this transition process. And again, you can send them to OIS, but we work closely with the counseling center. They are really adept at working with international students. But one thing I like to make clear for international families and students is that in the U.S. and at UIC in particular, counseling and that relationship with the therapist, it's really talk-based. While they do have some psychiatrists on staff, things like medication are not the first tool used and may not even be used if that's not something you need or want. But it's often just really like talk-based therapy, or they do a lot of group work. So maybe there are other students who are having a similar issue as you do. Maybe you manage anxiety or you have ADHD, or sometimes they do groups with international students. And so you can come and just talk with others who are in a similar situation, and that can be really, really helpful. So I love counseling services. I'm transparent. I used it when I was transitioning to undergrad. It was a tough transition for me, and I really credit my experience with a campus counselor, a therapist, to help me through that tricky phase.
And I mean, it is just sometimes you just need to talk, and you need to find someone who is feeling the same things as you, to not feel alone. And like, I just like, I would want all of our students, to know that like, there's always help.
Yeah.
You're never alone. You're never without support.
Yeah.
But it is that we talk a lot about this on Flamekeepers.
Yeah.
The counseling center, Carly was, on the pod, a couple episodes ago. And, it is about like them going to reach out to that resource though. That's what's really hard is self-advocacy and learning this. And I think when you're compounded with so many other things, it's like, how do I do that?
Yeah.
And so, but that's always the hardest piece that I find, getting the help and going out and seeking it, especially, when maybe that's not culturally something that you do, like, or it's not common practice. And
definitely. I think I was going to mention that keeping in mind that the university culture, the academic culture in the United States, it's individualism shows up because that's a big part of our culture here in the US, is this idea that you do for yourself. There's all of these resources, a plethora of them, but the unspoken expectation is that you seek them out. Yeah. If you need help, you speak up and you go. So that's something to keep in mind for our international families, is to, maybe encourage the student, tell them like, yes, go and do this, go get some help. Or maybe you're living in the residence halls and it's a conversation with your RA or someone else in the hall that can help make the connection for you to get the support that you need.
And our families, who are listening, a follow-up text is never seen, as a negative thing, at least in our eyes, just, texting your student saying like, hey, I know you were really struggling, have you made that appointment, with the counseling center, or, have you, gone to OIS and sought out, some resources, or,
how did it go?
What
are the next
exactly.
steps?
and that is such a big part of the transition too, is like, like they're not physically here with me, but I'm being supported, and I feel their presence like with me. And I mean, that's just like one of the many ways our families can support their students from afar.
And familiarizing yourself with the resources available and say like, oh, I heard there is a counseling center. Have you thought about, I saw online their hours are these. You could stop by.
Yeah. And that's why we do this podcast. We want to make sure that our families are getting, the information that they need to support their students.
Yeah.
It's always fun when the families are like, oh, I saw this. And the student is like, how did you know that? I go to school here. But
ultimately the student needs to be the one, right, to take that step.
Yeah. Self-advocacy. One of the things that the college experience like teaches you almost by proxy.
Yes.
And so, but a skill that is so essential to be developed even outside of like, for outside life, So yeah. Anna, I'm really loving like, this conversation. We touched a little bit on just, we talked about sending the encouraging text every now and then, but like, what are some other ways that our families can support their students, their international students from afar, or just, even someone that might live here in the United States and they just might not live in Chicago? Like, how can our families support other international students?
Yeah. So we've talked about it a little bit. It's this encouragement to take advantage of resources and opportunities. So again, the U.S. university experience, the context, there's all of this co-curricular stuff going on, right? There's the classes, the academics, but there are so many services and opportunities and programs that are included in your tuition and fees, right? And so tapping into those things are really critical to persistence and graduation, like getting to the end. So you can encourage your student to get involved, engage in campus. So data shows that international students who do get engaged on campus and build peer networks really persist at higher rates. And so that's things like building their social networks. Friendships are really important, obviously. And I know there's often a lot of pressure on international students that you have to make U.S. friends. I think it's a balance, right? Because, there are so many international students at UIC. And so there is the possibility of having a social network of similar individuals, maybe from your same country. And that can be really supportive to have people who understand your cultural context, understand your language, know where you come from, that unspoken familiarity. That can be really, really helpful. But to balance that with meeting people who are different from you, whether that be another domestic student or an international student from another country. And we're really lucky at UIC. We are such a diverse campus that everybody's kind of navigating that. That's not a uniquely international student experience, but to try to make sure that those friendships are varied and diverse and you tap into the different communities. So encouraging your students to do that, build their social networks, and getting involved on campus. So programs, OIS, we have a lot of programs out of our office, social and cultural things like trips to Pumpkin Farm. We do a Thanksgiving dinner for the entire international community each November.
That's fun.
Yeah, it is really fun. It's just a free, everybody, the international community is invited. They can try a typical, in quotes, Thanksgiving dinner, turkey, mashed potatoes, pumpkin pie, that kind of thing. That's a lot of fun. We do some other outings, and we also, there's a program we run called Intercultural Connections. I actually lead that program. It's each semester, we meet about 5 times, so it's a little more involved for students, but it's free. They don't have to pay anything to do it, but it's for students who maybe want to develop those relationships with other students who are different from them. We're open to U.S. students and all international students and develop their intercultural competency. So we do some activities to cultural self-reflection, learning about others, and learning about the culture at UIC. So that's another opportunity for engagement with our office that's a little more in-depth. But beyond that, there's just student organizations, the Center for Student Involvement we're in today. There's so many different activities, groups, clubs. So, it's hard. Sometimes it can be overwhelming, I think. So families can encourage their students to maybe just try one thing.
Yeah.
Go to the involvement fair in the spring or in the winter and just walk around, see what might catch your eye, and just try one thing. And usually that one thing will lead to another, will lead to another, will lead to another. Take advantage of those social resources. And then other thing is support resources. So academic, we talked about the counseling center, but there's other things. One I want to highlight is the writing center.
A resource that all students should utilize so frequently.
Yeah.
I mean, in addition to all the other resources here that we have at UIC, but the writing center,
Absolutely. And again, it's built into the tuition and fees. Students do not have to pay extra to get this really individualized tutoring and support on their writing. They help students from any stage of the process, whether it's ideation all the way down to final draft editing. And the reason I bring it up for international students is one of the academic issues we see time and time again is international students struggling with the concepts of plagiarism and citation styles. And I bring it up not to say that international students aren't academically prepared. They absolutely are.
Absolutely.
They're successful students to be admitted and to be here. But some of those concepts of plagiarism, what constitutes an idea and who owns that idea and how do we give credit for ideas, those are cultural concepts. And again, United States, we're very individualistic. And so individuals want individual credit for their individual ideas. And so our citation rules are often pretty strict. Whereas other cultures, the students may have come from, they're not quite as strict or they're different. And so the Writing Center can really help students understand what's expected in terms of academic writing and making sure students don't mistakenly violate academic rules when it comes to citation, because we do see that happen. So Writing Center is really wonderful. And then there's other tutoring like the Math and Science Learning Center.
I think that's so important because we have a lot of our international students who are majoring in STEM fields and, just even understanding those concepts. From the US, math was always a struggle for me. And so I think even, coming from a different country and trying to learn, how math is taught here, things like that.
Yep. And, the curriculum, it's a US-based curriculum and, college is an extension of what's learned in high school in the United States. And so, again, it may not be that you're not a smart student, but perhaps just the curriculums didn't match up and there's a bit of a gap and you need a little assistance with that gap. Teaching assistants or TAs. Yep.
Yeah. And I think that might be a different concept too, where there is an additional person in the class who's there to support and help.
Support and to teach. They're teachers, often teachers in training. They want to be college professors someday. And so they're another support resource. They hold office hours. Professors hold office hours. It's great to go in there and get to know those TAs and professors maybe before you have a problem so that they're aware of who you are. So all of that stuff, I would really encourage. You could ask your student, have you tried the writing center? Have you checked in with your professor, your
Yeah.
teaching assistant?
Yeah. Are there TAs in your class? What does the syllabus say the office hours
Yeah.
are and things like that?
Yeah.
All great things, families, to ask, your students to show support.
Yeah. And it's, we talked about individualism as
Mhm.
kind of a generalized cultural norm in the United States. Another one is a kind of a preference for extroversion. So this idea that a student is asking questions, seeking out help, speaking up in class, those are seen as good things.
Yeah.
Yeah. And someone, admitting maybe I don't understand, that's not necessarily a sign of weakness.
Mm-mm.
It's a sign of strength to admit, I don't get this.
Yeah.
I need some help. Can you help me?
Mhm.
So definitely seen as a good thing to reach out if you need assistance.
Something that, even our families, here in the United States often navigate, with the first year in college is FERPA.
Yes.
The Federal Education Rights to Privacy Act.
Uh-huh.
Right? I was wondering if you could shed just some light on
Yeah.
how FERPA, applies to students here and how that, may be something that our international families might have to navigate or learn to navigate.
Yeah, I thank you for bringing that up because, yes, FERPA, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, basically what it does, it's a federal law that protects students' educational records, especially if they're over 18 and in a higher education situation like university and college are. And so what that means practically is that things beyond sort of directory information, student's name, maybe their address, what they're studying, is protected information. So that includes their class schedule, their grades, their student bills and tuition. Even if you are the parent and you are the one paying the bills, you can't just call up and ask for this information without your student's consent. And so I think it's really important to understand that while we have all of these services, we have all of these opportunities, all of these people who are ready to help, your student needs to be the one to access that information. That said, if your student wants your assistance and you want to be able to call on their behalf, or maybe we see this a lot in OIS, there's a family member who lives in the United States,
Yeah.
a cousin, an aunt, an uncle who wants to help advocate on behalf of the student. You can do that. The student just has to sign a waiver. They need to sign and say, it's okay for this specific person to access my private and confidential records.
Yeah. And with that waiver, students can select what they want their folks to have access to. It could be grades, it could be financial, it could be conduct, And so I always like to highlight that, that if your student is giving you access, I mean, it is often specific things.
Yeah, because we talk a lot about the counseling center.
Yeah.
There's heightened levels of confidentiality when it comes to counseling and things like that. But, schedules and bills, it's often about the bills.
Yeah.
Paying the tuition. So talk to your student. If that's something you guys want to set up in advance, make sure that FERPA waiver is signed before your student gets on campus, before there's an issue you're trying to navigate.
And a great way to set up that conversation, especially, if they were, if in high school, families had access to that, and it seemed to work really well for your student, a good way to frame that conversation might be, hey, this worked really well in high school. I respect your, your budding independence, but maybe we try this for a semester, and see, how it happens. And I think when you frame those conversations like that with your students, I think it's just going to be a more positive result, because you're showing that you trust them.
You trust them and you're honoring, like you said, this transition, this development of autonomy and independence that is part of the college experience. But yeah, if you're, as families, you call an office and ask for information and the person on the line says, I'm sorry, I can't give you that. We're not trying to be rude. We're not trying to make your life more difficult. We're just literally following the law.
Yeah. We don't, we want to have our jobs.
Yeah.
And so, Anna, we have covered just so much, and this has just been such a great conversation.
Good.
But I also know that OIS, we've talked a little bit about this in the beginning, they support students through the immigration process and things like that. I know that is always a conversation. I mean, you were in OL training today, and we talked a lot about helping students navigate that process or how your office supports that. And so just what advice can you share with our families and students who might be listening about just maintaining immigration status, the importance of that. And
Yeah.
so I was wondering if you could just share a little bit about
I
that.
would love to. I would definitely be remiss if I didn't bring up maintaining immigration status because it's one of our offices, a thing we spend a lot of time on
Yeah, I
is
think
helping students and educating them on how to maintain their status. So when we educate students, we kind of break it down into 5 steps. That's how we present it in our Maintaining Status 101 course. 5 steps to maintaining status. But the first one is know your documents. Seems easy, right? But really take the time to understand what is on your passport, what is the important information. Most students will get a form called an I-20. We issue it out of our office if they get an F-1 visa or a DS-2019 if they're getting a J-1 visa. A smaller number of students get that one. But really understanding what is contained in that document, the dates, the expirations, the signatures that are required, your visa, when does that expire? Where did you get it, renewed? Things like that. So understand your documents, keep them safe. Never throw an immigration document away. Always keep everything.
Put it in a folder.
Yep. And these days, digitize everything. So you have a digital copy and your physical copy. So step 1, know your documents. Step 2, align your academic record and your immigration record. And so what I mean is that anything that's going on in your academics needs to be reflected in your immigration record. So your I-20, like I mentioned before, it has the name of the school where you're studying, the program that you're studying, your dates of your program. All of that needs to match reality. So if at any point you want to change your major or you need more time to study, or maybe you want to transfer schools for some reason, you need to update that immigration record before the change happens.
Absolutely.
So those things need to be aligned. And then one other thing with aligning the academic and immigration is maintaining full-time status. That's actually probably the biggest one. Each semester, we're sending out message upon message. Enroll full-time. International students are admitted to the United States to be students. And so that is the expectation that they maintain full-time enrollment. Undergraduate students, that's 12 credits. Graduate students, it's 9 or 8 if they have a 50% assistantship. So each semester, by the add-drop deadline, they have to meet that requirement, including any nuances within. There's some limits on online classes, but we explain that all in our website and we send out messages reminding students. And then if your ability to meet any of those requirements changes, like again, you want to change your major, or maybe there's something going on in your life really acute, like an illness or something that's prohibiting you from being able to enroll full time, you need to notify OIS so we can guide you through that so that your immigration record isn't impacted. So again, academics and immigration really closely aligned. Third thing is work only when authorized. Like I mentioned, student visas are for study. They prioritize study, not work. So there are some limits around work for international students. You need to understand what those limits are and not violate them. And I always say, ask OIS first. If you are in doubt if an opportunity is allowable, come and talk to us so that we can help you make the best decision and not, again, unknowingly violate your immigration status. Fourth step is be a smart international travel. When you're going to go home for that visit to your family or to wherever you may be, check in with our office. We have a travel signature that you need on your I-20 so that you can travel smoothly. If you need to apply for a visa or renew a visa, we want to make sure that you've planned properly for that because it can really vary where you are in the world on how smoothly or long that process might take. So think before booking that flight, talk to us. And then lastly, just again, communicate with OIS. We send out a lot of reminders. If there's an issue that a student needs to address, we often send a message directly. Don't ignore our emails because they need to usually be acted upon.
If I could add a thing to this list as well, it would be what you just said, just in general, don't ignore emails.
I know. And it's tough because they get so many.
So many.
Yeah, they really do. So I empathize. But if it has to do with your immigration status, that's just underpinning the whole ability to continue studying. And we don't want anything to happen to it. We want you to just do the things you need to do so you can focus on your studies. And that's the good stuff, right? That's what we want. We want you to focus on the good stuff.
Yeah, we want you here. We want you to be able to stay here.
Yeah. So those are our 5 steps. There's a lot more detail under each one of those points. We go over it in orientation with new international students. There's a whole online course we provide that they go through to understand. All of it's laid out on our website. We have a tab just for immigration. and students can read through, or families can read through those basic points and processes that underlie them. So,
Yeah. And Anna, this has been, like I said, this has just been such a really good conversation. I've
good.
learned like so much just, about
Yay.
how, I can support our international students and the community better. And so I really, really thank you, for being a part of this today. But, before we sign off, just like, what advice would you share with families just in general as they support students,
Yeah.
like what nuggets can you leave them with
Sure.
today?
And get a little teary-eyed even just
Oh.
thinking of this, because like I'm a parent myself. My kids are much smaller, but someday they will be, hopefully, fingers crossed, going to college. And I know it's a big transition. So I guess just leaving on a positive note of congratulations. Taking on the challenge of international study is huge. It's a big endeavor. It's a big endeavor. So I just congratulate these families on having a bright, a bold, a brave student who has taken this opportunity in their hands and said, yes, let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, like you are literally going to a whole new place.
Yeah.
And that is brave.
It is brave. It's so brave. And I, now again, being a parent, I can empathize with parents that, my gosh, my child is moving so far away. And I think oftentimes the motivation is to go and learn more about the host culture and maybe, experience part of this new place and take on aspects of it because they're really enamored with the United States. But again, I've done this work for 20 years.
Yeah.
And time again, what I see happens as a surprise to some students is the appreciation, awareness, and understanding they develop for their home country and the people and places that have made them who they are. So while your student may be moving very, very far away, you may find that they grow even closer to you in their appreciation of everything that makes them who they are. So hopefully that is a positive, surprising outcome of this. And then just lastly, I would say if you have ever have a chance to visit, please come and visit us in Chicago. I know international families don't often have that luxury. Flights are expensive, distances are far, but if you can make it happen, it's so wonderful to see an international student on campus with their family, showing them around this place that has really informed who they are now. It's a great experience for everybody. And Chicago's fantastic.
Oh my gosh, yes, absolutely. I often see a lot of our international families around the commencement graduation season, and it is so like, oh my gosh, you're gonna make me cry.
Yeah,
Like,
I know,
just
right?
just thinking about that moment, like for them, and this might be the only time that they get to see where their student has been for the past 4, 3, 5 years. So like it's a really beautiful moment.
It is. So congratulations. You've got a pretty incredible kid. And this is going to be a transformative experience, hopefully, for all of you, and hopefully bring you all closer together, too, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Flames families, this has been another episode of Flamekeepers, the podcast that supports UIC parents and families. And we hope you enjoyed this episode. I want to thank Anna again for being with
so
us.
welcome.
And we hope you tune in for our next episode. And, if you need anything, in the meantime, or you heard something on one of these episodes that you just want more information about, please reach out to our office. We have a specific email that is just for our families, and it is famhelp@uic.edu. That's FAMHELP@uic.edu. Flames families, thank you so much for everything you do. Take care. We'll see you next time. Well, Flames families, that's going to wrap up another episode of Flamekeepers, the podcast that seeks to support the parents and families of UIC students. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you have any questions for us about anything that we've talked about today, please feel free to send us an email at famhelp@uic.edu. That's FAMHELP@uic.edu. Again, we hope you enjoyed today's episode of Flamekeepers and that you join us for our next one. Take care.